Hello, I'm Janet LeCamp. Welcome back to the Unstoppable Moms Summit.
I'm so happy today to be able to introduce Darlene Lancer. Darlene, welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me. This is such a sensitive topic. So many parents suffer from the fact that their children are addicted or have even lost them to substance abuse and addiction. Really heartbreaking.
It is. It's heartbreaking, and it's very serious. And Darlene, I'm so happy that you were able to come today. So Darlene, do you want to begin by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've been in this field. I've been a therapist for over 30 years. And personally, I was in Al-Anon for many years, and I know people who have lost a child to addiction. I've had clients who have, and of course, then many come to me because their child is abusing drugs or alcohol. So I know it's very serious, and I'm familiar with the subject, personally and professionally.
Right, yes. Wow. What is it that you would like to share with them today? What do you think would be of most value?
Well, I guess one of the most important things is not to feel guilty.
Right, okay.
Because parents feel guilty when they're unable to stop a child from using, when a child harms himself or is on the street, or the horrible consequences of addiction. So self-blame isn't effective. It's part of the problem. So the first thing to know is what they teach us, you're really powerless over somebody else's addiction. There are things you can do to incentivize someone to change. Suffering the consequences of their addiction is the most powerful motivation for change. But there are things you can do to circumstances to increase that likelihood, but you can't talk somebody into it, convince them. So it's kind of a fine thing. It takes a lot of time to understand that. I think 12-step meetings are helpful, that you're powerless, but that doesn't mean you're helpless.
Right.
And also to be able to have consequences. So it's very hard. It's one thing to have consequences for a child that's not misbehaving or is not doing well in school. It's another if it means that you might have to have some boundaries where you think your child might die as a result. For instance, if you tell them they can't have any drugs or alcohol in the home or else they have to leave, and then you think, well, they may be on the street. So those are hard decisions.
Yeah.
Life and death decisions. And people need a lot of support to do that. It's not something that I think you can just do on your own because your frustration comes out. So it's a question of being firm and loving at the same time.
Wow, and that's such a challenge. It's such a challenge.
Especially if you have a lot of fear, because fear will drive your aggression, your anxiety, and that's not helpful. Shaming your child just increases the likelihood that they'll use drugs and alcohol and drive them away from you.
Oh.
Shame is part of the problem.
Yeah.
And feeling shame that you're not, a more effective parent. And you take it out on your child. So I wrote a book about conquering shame and codependency. So, healing yourself can help you with your child, raising your own self-esteem. And parents ask me, how can I raise my child's self-esteem? Well, the best thing you can do is raise your own.
Right.
Because most of our parenting is unconscious, comes across in moments of frustration, or we end up doing what our parents did, or the extreme opposite, which isn't helpful either.
Right. Yeah.
Not be like that.
We either do what they did or we go to the complete opposite of what they did.
Yeah, you go swing too far the other way.
Yeah.
So if you have fear, then you can you end up being overprotective. Let's say you were abused, so you want to be overprotective.
Mm-hmm.
And what you end up doing is you instill fear in your child that the world is dangerous.
Right. Yeah.
Hovering too much.
Absolutely.
Or your parent was too controlling, and then you're too laissez-faire and you don't have enough rules and boundaries. So it's not easy to be a parent. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. So
no, and it's a real minefield out there. And I'm glad you know, lots of the things you mentioned are exactly what I felt that I went through. And so I can really imagine that there's a lot of people listening that feel the same way. You know, you mentioned that your powerless over somebody else's addiction, but it doesn't mean you're helpless. And what does that, like, how can specifically, do you have any specific things you can say that to help your child?
Well, giving them a lot of love, but also boundaries. That doesn't mean they can do whatever they want.
Right.
So letting them know that, they're going through a difficult time. They need love and understanding. I don't know, every situation is different.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times kids are abusing drugs and alcohol because their parents aren't getting along.
Yeah.
So they feel, that left out. They're missing a connection with their parent.
Missing a connection, yeah.
So, that's not always the case. Sometimes their parents can be loving with their child, but not getting along with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes the problem is the couple, the marriage between them.
Right.
The parents, between the parents.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
So it's considering family systems.
Yeah.
Sometimes the child acts out to bring the parents together, so they'll work together on the common problem, meaning the child. Feel the connect between the parents.
Right. Or they feel, I know they can feel unimportant too if the parents are not getting along or are
exactly
on themselves. They just feel irrelevant. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you can be role models. You can set a good example of, sometimes parents are telling their children to control their emotions and the parents yelling at them.
Yeah. Very inconsistent and do what I say, not what I do. Like you said, unconscious too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole thing of enabling.
Oh, yeah.
I've had parents with adult children that they're supporting, and they keep wanting the child to be more responsible, but they keep giving them money, which instead of the children working, the parents are paying for their clothes and everything else, often more than necessities.
Yeah, and often I think, like you mentioned before, the fear, I think there's so much of our behaviors, when I just speak for myself, are based in fear. Fear that if I don't do it, that this will happen or that will happen, and the worst fear of all, of course, being death. So it's really, I think you're right. When you mentioned, you can't do it alone, you need help.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. So you mentioned Al-Anon. I personally, one of the reasons I wanted to do this summit is because I didn't find a lot of help of people that could actually be non-judgmental and really give good advice. People that had actually lived it.
There's also Narang if you have a child that's abusing marijuana or drugs.
Mm-hmm.
But they have, Al-Anon specifically has groups for parents. They have general groups, and they have meetings, like a subset of meetings for parents of alcoholics. I don't know if Narang does. There's not as many members, so it may not, but it's something you can check into.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And so Al-Anon, I want to tell a little bit about it, is a 12-step program also similar to Alcoholics Anonymous.
Right. There's also some people like Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christian-based version of the 12 steps.
Oh.
And I don't know if they have programs for only for parents of addicts.
Right. Okay.
And just as an aside, if you had, or any of your listeners had a parent that's an addict, there's meetings for in Al-Anon for children of alcoholics.
Yeah. And there's, what do they call it for teens?
Alateen.
Alateen. Yeah, that's right too. Yeah.
It's a terrific program.
Yeah.
Right.
Alateen.
For children of alcoholics.
Yeah. Probably for siblings too.
Teenage children. Yeah. They even have Elatot for younger ones. I don't know if those are on Zoom, but they used to have meetings anyway.
I didn't know that. I didn't know they had Elatot. Wow, because that's really good, because those little children, they don't even know, what the emotional impacts they're feeling are, most likely. So that's really good. Get them off to a good start when they're young.
But they absorb everything that's going on in the family.
Yeah, and it just goes right in. So, wow, that's great. So Darlene, is there anything else that you would like to share with the mothers who have children who might be addicts or living with mental health challenges? Definitely
get support. And it's important that you and your spouse are on the same page. That's not always possible.
Right.
But that's extremely important, that you have a unified front. Otherwise, your child may use, that's a problem with a lot of families I see. That one parent is too strict, and maybe the other one then becomes overindulgent to compensate for the one that's too strict.
Yeah.
And so that upsets the system a lot. So you have to be in alignment. It's like the parents are the executives of the company, meaning the family. And you have to have a unified front in talking to your child. And that both gives them comfort, but also that they can't play one of you off against the other.
Yeah.
Which often happens.
Oh, yeah. It reduces some.
Addicts are very manipulative. So
Manipulation's a big one. You really summed up the feelings. I can tell you that.
My book, Codependency for Dummies, has it's a whole workbook really on overcoming codependency, and it all applies to parents of addicts. I don't know if you know, but it's transgenerational. And people listening might, if they think about it, discover that they had an addict in maybe a great-grandparent, if not your own parents.
Oh, okay.
And it may not be alcohol or drugs. It could have been overeating, gambling, something else that maybe wasn't talked about. So denial is a big part of the problem. So there's some questions that you can ask yourself whether you're in denial in the book, and how you're not sure whether your child is an addict or not. You can look at some signs that maybe some questions to see whether or not they are. I went to Al-Anon, I don't know, after some months, my kid said to me, "You're so much nicer since you've been going to those meetings."
Yeah.
And I wasn't even so conscious of it. It was just that I was getting some support.
Yeah. Well, and once, I don't know, my experience is once we start working on those steps, lots inside us changes, and the way we look at things changes. and how we communicate changes. So
I think you're referring to the 12 steps of the 12-step program. I also wrote an ebook that is spiritual transformation of the 12 steps.
oh,
So it's a handbook where you can work through this. There's a lot of exercises in there where you can work through those 12 steps.
spiritual transformation of the 12 steps. Okay.
Yeah, in the 12 steps. Yeah, it's all on my website, whatiscodependency.com.
Oh, sorry, is it just called codependency.com?
Oh, whatiscodependency.com.
Okay, so if people want to find out more, they can go to whatiscodependency.com. Great.
Yeah, and I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I have some YouTubes up. I have a lot of media that you can find on my media page, audio podcasts and things there.
Great. I feel that you covered the feelings and the challenges that people go through really thoroughly. It felt like to me like you were, in my head a lot of the time when I was back in. Yeah. It was.
Well, I've worked with a lot of people in that situation, and the tactics and strategies will vary depending on the circumstance and the child and what's going on.
Right.
For instance, if they're failing in school, if they're stealing, so you really have to talk about the specific situation and what the person has tried, what's failed.
Okay. Yeah.
How they approach it.
Right.
But it's very important to be assertive. Boundaries are so important in recovery that I also have an ebook on how to speak your mind, become assertive and set limits, and a webinar on how to be assertive. So that's not yelling and it's not nagging, and it's being very clear and concise and using I messages. So boundaries are not easy. First, you have to learn how to be assertive. And then, as I said, when boundaries don't work, I have a blog. I have a monthly blog people can sign up for. And one of them is 10 reasons why boundaries don't work.
Oh, that's great.
So a lot of times it doesn't work because there's no consequences.
Or they're not enforced. Yeah.
I mean, imagine you yell at a toddler over and over to clean their room or something, and they don't do it. Well, if there's no consequence, they probably won't do it.
Yeah, ever.
So yelling isn't very effective either. It's kind of like maybe 3 strikes are out. So you tell them what you want, you remind them, and then you said, if you don't do it again, then you're going to have to go to bed early or something. And it's harder with a teenager. You have to know where you have leverage.
Yeah.
Sending a kid to their room where they always stay in the room, it's not a consequence.
No, that's where they want to be anyway. Isolated, doing their
They have
thing.
to know what they want, and so that there's a consequence to their behavior.
Yeah. Well, that makes perfect sense. And I imagine too that, I haven't read your Codependency for Dummies or looked at it. So obviously that's a workbook. So there must be, things in there that we can do that will increase our awareness and hopefully our ability to build our resilience or our skill set or
Right.
something. Yeah.
There's a chapter in there on communication.
Oh, okay.
And, so it's about 300 pages. It's very thorough.
Oh my gosh. Again, I just want to let people know you can find Darlene at whatiscodependency.com if you want to reach out to her or get any of her books.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Darlene.